Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're dissecting a fascinating piece of living technology, the Constitution of India. We're zeroing in on a massive bug in its operating system, this ongoing, high-stakes battle with political defections. Think about it. The Constitution is basically the ultimate software running a democracy, right? But what happens when the very people elected to operate that software find a backdoor to manipulate it for their own gain? Well, we're going to dive into exactly how a law designed to create stability accidentally created a giant constitutional loophole. So here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the defection problem itself, then how the anti-defection law tried to fix it. After that, we'll get a global perspective, unpack the infamous speaker's loophole, and finally, look at the search for actual solutions. Starting with part 1, the defection problem and why it's such a massive threat to democratic stability. To really grasp the urgency here, we have to rewind to a pretty wild historical moment in 1967. There's this famous catchphrase in Indian politics, Aya Ram, Gaya Ram, which literally translates to Ram came, Ram went. It perfectly captures the absolute chaos of the era. The phrase was actually born from the story of a Haryana MLA named Gaya Lal. Get this. In 1967, he switched his political party allegiances 3 separate times in a single day. It's wild. It became the ultimate symbol for opportunistic horse trading, a time when politicians treated loyalty like a revolving door, just to grab better positions or more power. And Gaya Lal was definitely not an isolated case. 1,500. That's the staggering number of MLAs, along with a full quarter of all members of parliament who defected between 1967 and 1971. I mean, to put that into perspective, imagine trying to run an entire country when a fourth of your national representatives are just constantly switching sides. It completely paralyzed the system, causing mass government collapses and administrative breakdowns all over the place. Moving to part 2, the anti-defection law, and the attempt to fix this bug. Obviously, when a system crashes this often, you desperately need a patch. The journey to a real solution was, honestly, a long road. It kicked off right when the crisis peaked in '67, with the YB Chavan Committee recommending that defectors just be disqualified outright. Then, throughout the 1970s, you had multiple private members' bills trying to tackle it, but they all fizzled out. It wasn't until 1985, under Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi, that the 52nd Constitutional Amendment Act finally crossed the finish line. This officially dropped the 10th schedule into the Constitution, which we now know as the anti-defection law. Okay, so what are the actual rules of the game here? Essentially, a politician loses their seat if they voluntarily give up their party membership, or if they vote, or even just abstain from voting, against their party's official directive, which is called a whip. The law also kicks out independent members who join a party after winning an election, and nominated members who join a party after their first 6 months. There is one major exception, though. If 2/3 of a party's members agree to merge with another party, the whole group is protected. The whole point was just to enforce party discipline and actually respect what the voters decided. Up next is part 3, the global perspective, and how the rest of the world plays the game. It's really helpful to zoom out and see how this uniquely Indian system compares to other democracies. Looking globally, the contrast is super fascinating. In Western democracies like the UK, the US, and Canada, there's actually no legal ban on defection. Legislators can cross the floor or vote against their party without losing their seat at all. The consequences are purely political. Then you have Germany in the middle, using a cool institutional safeguard called the constructive vote of no confidence. That basically means you can't remove a government unless you simultaneously elect a replacement, which totally prevents sudden collapses. But over in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Nepal, they use strict legal disqualification. They've opted for hard legal punishment over political flexibility just to keep things stable. But here's where the plot really thickens. Part 4, the speaker's loophole, or as I like to call it, the referee who stops the clock. India's strict system has a pretty fatal design flaw. Under this law, the final authority to decide if a member gets disqualified is the Speaker of the House. But what happens if the Speaker just refuses to do anything? We call this procedural passivity. It's when the Speaker deliberately delays taking action on a disqualification petition just to protect defectors who happen to be aligned with their own political party. Think of the Speaker like a referee in a sports game. Instead of making a bad call that you could at least review, this referee just swallows the whistle and stops the game clock entirely by doing absolutely nothing. The law is powerless while defectors get a free pass. And this is not just some theoretical legal quirk. It is a repetitive, highly strategic pattern. First, look at the Kishan Megachandra case in Manipur, where disqualification petitions sought completely unheard for months. Then in UP, the Rajinder Singh Rana case saw a speaker delaying action just long enough for a brand new government to literally form using the support of those exact defectors. And in the 2025 Paddy Kaushik Reddy case in Telangana, you had total, deliberate inaction for over 11 months. The Supreme Court has even had to step in and warn that this kind of behavior is essentially committing a fraud on democracy. Which brings us to part 5, the search for solutions, and how we might actually go about patching the Constitution. Let's impartially weigh the legal arguments out there. So, experts usually point to 2 major structural reforms. First is setting up an independent tribunal. The pro here is a no-brainer. It completely takes the politically aligned speaker out of the equation. But the cons are tough. It would require a massive constitutional amendment, and frankly, whoever the executive appoints to that tribunal could still end up being partisan. The second idea, recommended by the 170th Law Commission, is handing this power to the president or governor. The upside is they're supposed to be neutral authorities. The downside, they still operate in a highly political arena, meaning we might just be shifting the bias over to the central executive instead of actually fixing the problem. It's an incredibly delicate balancing act, as highlighted by Dr. S. Padmaja's scholarly research in the International Journal for Legal Research and Analysis. On one side, you absolutely need strict party discipline for stable governments and to honor the voter's choice. But on the flip side, if the laws are too rigid or easily manipulated, you end up crushing an individual legislator's freedom of conscience. The research really stresses that we desperately need structural reforms, but pulling them off without accidentally creating brand new loopholes is seriously difficult. Since rewriting the Constitution takes years, law scholar Shivanki Yadav proposes a much faster fix, limited judicial review. This relies on a legal tool called a writ of mandamus, which basically lets courts legally force a constitutional authority to just do its job. The genius here is that the courts are only reviewing the process, not the outcome. They aren't telling the speaker how to rule. They're just demanding that the speaker actually makes a ruling within a strict timeline. It tosses out the outdated idea that courts have to sit on their hands until a speaker decides to act. Instead, it treats this deliberate stalling as an illegal evasion of the Constitution, drawing on past cases where governors were forced to stop delaying bills. It forces the referee to blow the whistle without the courts actually playing the game. And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The anti-defection law started as a really noble attempt to cure a democratic sickness. But human nature and political ambition found a way to weaponize the very referee meant to enforce the rules. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with this. How do we actually balance party discipline with true democratic accountability? Can a system ever really regulate itself, or are we always going to need the judiciary to step in and keep the clock ticking? Thanks for hanging out and learning with us today, and we'll see you in the next explainer.